Guess what, livers? Spar Melville is giving away a food hamper valued at 500 Rand. To win, all you have to do is subscribe to our YouTube channel, I Love Melville Live, and engage on our weekly shows, Melville Streets in the morning from 7 a.m. to 10 a.m. and Melville Drive in the afternoon from 3 p.m. to 6 p.m. right here on ilovemelville.live.
Good afternoon, and it's the Week in Review. And recently on this program, we've been asking the question, where is South Africa going to? You remember, if you're one of our regular viewers, that we've been concerned about the allegations, the rumors, that the ANC Secretary General Ace Magashule has been actively working at undermining the president at branch level. It's not necessarily being admitted to, but more and more stories along those lines are coming to us. This past week, the Vrye Weekblad editor and veteran journalist, very experienced Max de Pre, also came up with the statement that the ANC is fast unraveling, as he put it, and that the president is actually becoming more and more weak at the knees, if you could put it like that. Max de Pre, good afternoon, welcome.
Hello, thank you.
What now, Max? Where are we now? When we listen to all these things happening, one gets the sense that we're at a very dangerous time in the history of this new, well, the Rainbow Nation, as the Archbishop called it, which has faded a bit now.
Yes, and I think there are a lot of people who would revel at the idea that the ANC is in trouble. And I think we need to tell them, think again. An unstable ANC is not, at this point, good for South Africa. I wrote that on Friday morning that the ANC was a bit in trouble. What I didn't know was that, and I saw that later in the day in the Mail and Guardian, where they got hold of a discussion document of the ANC, and where I said, you know, they are sort of fraying at the edges. The ANC itself uses stronger language. They're talking about anarchy in the party. They say some form of organizational state of emergency needs to be imposed. And then they say, quote, we cannot start the process of renewal under conditions of anarchy. So that was borne out. My piece is written after I had a long lunch here in Cape Town with two NEC members who were old mates of mine. And it was meant to be more like a social meeting. And I was surprised at how they freely, and I hope they're not listening, freely took part in the gossip about Cyril Ramaphosa, because they were both very staunch Ramaphosa people. And we talked about that, and I think I came away with the idea that President Ramaphosa doesn't have enough strong, loyal people very close to him who are prepared to fight for him. And there are now more than 3 or 4 factions. It's not only the Magashule faction. In fact, I think the Magashule faction is the weakest because he's never been strong in himself. He can sabotage, but he can't lead. But we're talking about many other people. And so freely at this meeting, they discussed, will it be Paul Mashatile? Will it be Landiwe Sisulu? What are the chances of Zweli Mkhize making a comeback? So it's an organization in disarray, and what we'll see on the weekend, coming weekend, is an NEC meeting, where for the first time they will actually discuss Ace Magashule's position. The NEC, as did the Congress, took a decision that if you are charged with serious corruption or crime, that you should step aside. And he gave them the middle finger and he said, the branches elected me and only the branches will remove me. And the idea that I got is that there will be a push by some of his enemies to say, well, you cannot do that. You cannot contradict the NEC like that. You're a part of that. So there will be an effort, I understand, to suspend him. They cannot fire him because he was elected, but they can suspend him. So maybe the step aside that they talked about will take that form, that he will remain the Secretary General as he was elected, but he will not function as that. So Jesse Duarte will function. But who knows, to try and predict what the position is in the ANC and what the strength of President Ramaphosa is like trying to predict the weather in Cape Town. I mean, all the indications are it will be 30 degrees and sunny and quiet, and then suddenly the clouds come rolling in and you're completely wrong.
The question that comes up, when you look at this and the way we've moved to this over the past how many years now, to this situation that we're in now, and then you look back and you think that South Africa's, there's that old saying that every country gets the government it deserves. We've been doing that for many years now, it seems, and I'm not so sure we necessarily deserved what we had earlier. But
then we must be a very undeserving country if that's
exactly.
True.
So, but when you name names like Mashatile and Sisulu, there's no one there that you mentioned and that other people have been mentioning when they talk about possible new leaders. There's no one there who actually inspires you with any, a feeling that here is somebody who can actually take over and lead. And that surely must be very worrying.
Yes, I think so. I think the leadership vacuum at the ANC is quite troubling. And you look at some of the candidates, a bit of a checkered history, most of them. And as you say, and I agree, I don't find any of them very inspiring. Although there is the saying that cometh the hour, cometh the man stroke woman. So it's possible, but I don't see it in the names that I have mentioned. Maybe we'll, in a next generation, there are some names. I mean, and immediately when you talk like that, you're talking about Crown Prince in the ANC, everybody says Ronald Lamola. So there's young talent there, but the kind of people who could challenge Cyril Ramaphosa at the next Congress, not inspiring. So now what we're doing, and I mean, this is the report that the Mail and Guardian was referring to. It is a discussion document for the National General Council for April next year. And it seems like everything we're going to experience from now on will have that in mind, the National General Council meeting. And that's, for those who don't understand how that works, it's in between Congresses. The ANC has an NGC. And that's the most important meeting in between the 5-year Congresses. And so in the past, it's been used to weaken the leader. It can be even used to kick out the leader if there's a motion of no confidence. And so everything is building up to then. But at the same time, by then, I think Mr. Magashule's trial would have started. Mr. Bongo's trial will have started. Mr. Zuma's trial will have started. I think we will have heard a lot more from the Zondo Commission. So I think get the popcorn. It's some entertainment only if our country's future wasn't at stake.
Well, that's what worries one. You said cometh the hour, cometh the man or woman. But what we've been seeing lately makes you think it should be cometh the hour, cometh the villain, because Zondo sits and suddenly people that you've actually seen as some of the good guys, they're about to go to jail.
Yeah.
Vincent Smith's a very good example of that.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, I think Kobus,
who can you trust?
I think, and people might say this is very harsh, but it is my own background, so I don't say it easily. I think what we're seeing now, the sort of fraying at the edges, the anarchy, and even the disintegration of Ramaphosa's very staunch support in the NEC is that the ANC is just too corrupt as an organization. I think a lot of people sat in the NEC and cheered Ramaphosa on when he said we're going to clean house and we're going to renew. And now the search for corrupt people is cutting too deep. And so there are a number of people on the NEC who fear that they'll be next. So suddenly they are wavering in their support. And that's the atmosphere in which Magashule and company will thrive. And what bothers me a lot, a last quick point, is the use of the shock troops of the Umkhonto we Sizwe Military Veterans Association, also in terms of xenophobic attacks. That is being organized from Luthuli House, where Magashule sits, where Karl Niehaus sits.
The other question comes up is, why didn't we see this earlier, or why did we ignore it? Maybe if I think back, early 1990s, Paul Truwella, a journalist, a member of the struggle, he's now in his 80s, but he wrote a piece, I think it was 1991, 92 already, a very important piece about the corruption and the among the top brass, the top leaders of the ANC in exile already.
Yes.
And the way they treated people who they thought weren't exactly on the same page as they were.
Yes.
And nothing was ever really reported on that, ever said after that. It just seemed to be swept away. And now suddenly we're seeing here and there people are starting to point to that again. I mean, we had people like Joe Modise and even Chris Hani referred to by Paul Truwella as having been, his whole involvement at Camp Quattro and so on. And surely that should have been a warning already to the people, the people in the internal struggle in this country, that they had to be on the lookout for that.
Yeah.
We didn't.
Yeah, that's certainly true. We even had people inside Umkhonto we Sizwe who wrote books and who wrote pieces and gave interviews who told of personal experiences. I mean, the one incident that always stands out is one MK member who explained how Joe Modise, his supreme commander, sent his platoon to infiltrate South Africa to go and buy him a pair of Kavala shoes in Johannesburg and take it back into Angola. Kobus, I think the answer to that is, and I feel slightly guilty myself, is we were too forgiving. We were too prepared to say this was exile. It was hard in exile, and it was hard in exile. And they were being infiltrated by the South African security police and so on. And we were far too forgiving. I think what we should have said is, okay, it was tough in exile. It was tough to be in the military camps and you're under attack all the time. But once it's over, why don't we have a proper ANC investigation? So, for instance, the death of Tami Zulu, a very, very promising young leader, a dynamic young leader who was thrown in jail in Lusaka for no reason, got out, died of poisoning. We saw that whole story unfold before the Truth Commission. The ANC actually had 3 commissions of inquiry, and it all came to naught. They were afraid to take on the big names like Joe Modise. And so that culture was then brought in. There's one other explanation, speaking for myself, and that is that we hoped that the internal, the Inziles, the internal resistance, the UDF and COSATU, we knew them. We knew the UDF, we knew Bosak, Tutu, Gerwel, Issel, a long list of people who were not crooks, who were Democrats. And we were hoping that that would become a very big part of the ANC post-1990, because I think history will teach that it was more the UDF, with its mass mobilization of the 80s, played a bigger role than Umkhonto we Sizwe in actually forcing de Klerk and company to the negotiating table. But in the end, the ANC, the exiles, swallowed up the UDF and spat it out, and with it, its culture. So yeah, it's something. What you're saying is something that people like myself should take to heart and say, we should have fought harder in the 90s when it was very unpopular to say, what about this? What about that? What about this? And not be so forgiving. But then we had Mandela, remember?
Yeah.
And we were all lulled into a completely different state. And then we had Thabo Mbeki, and after that, things went pear-shaped.
I think on that note, I'm going to welcome our other guest, Professor Antoni van Nieuwkerk. He's from Wits's School for Governance. Hello, Antoni, and glad to see you. And to end off this part of the program, I thought I'd bring you in here as well, seeing that you're at the School for Governance. From your side, your analysis on, is there any indication that things will come right, can improve, come right, without having a change of government? Because if there has to be a change of government, I think we're still going to wait quite some time, it seems.
Yeah, Kobus, thank you very much for the opportunity, and greetings to Max. It's nice to talk to you. If we wait for a change of government, it's a rare phenomenon in African politics. It happened recently in SADC, in Seychelles, where an opposition leader won the election, Ram Kalawan. He's a preacher as well. It's different from the Malawi example, where the opposite happened, or Tanzania. It's happened in Mauritius as well. So you have stable democracies where you see a change of government, a democratic process moves ahead quite stably, but it's underpinned by a stable economic context, if you want. I don't foresee the ANC handing over reins to an opposition party in our productive lifetime. The opposition is weak. The ANC is internally divided. I would rather say that there's a possibility of the ANC unraveling at the edges and splitting into two. And I'm afraid to say, Kobus, that it seems to me that the reformist faction of the ANC under the leadership of Cyril Ramaphosa will not win such a battle. And the combined forces, the RET, Radical Economic Transformation faction, if you want, including the Zumites and the Ace Magashule supporters and foes, and the people that Max earlier spoke about. If they can pull together, there's a chance that they take over the reins of the ANC. And there's a disturbing element of this in the recently released policy documents, which you mentioned a minute ago, which you can read online in the ANC journal, Umrubalo, where you look at the style and the language and the kind of analysis that is used to describe international relations, domestic politics, the state of organizational renewal, and so on and so forth. The kind of language here reminds me of late 80s, early 90s revolutionary talk in the ANC. The policy formulation process is not controlled by the reformist faction of the ANC. Cyril Ramaphosa and his small team of reformers are on the back foot, and they're fighting not only ANC division from inside, but a disunity in the alliance. and then coupled to a real pandemic crisis of COVID, coupled to an economic problem, coupled to a social breakdown of values and norms in society. And it will be very difficult, I think, for the small team to overcome this. I would rather say, Kobus, that what is in store for us, people say very pessimistically, you know, when you read some of the media, that, South Africa will become a failed state, things will stop working. I don't think so. I think things will continue to work, but in a different way. You know, Nigeria is Africa's most populous nation, second largest economy. Things work in Nigeria, but in a particular way.
Yeah.
In a particular way. And this is possibly, if we don't manage to make this transition from an ugly past to a stable democracy with economic growth and development, all the good stuff that we kept on dreaming about, then a version of Nigeria and Zimbabwe, a hybrid of the two, is what awaits us, unfortunately.
What worries me is that there's another element that we haven't spoken about ever on this program. But certainly what I've been watching is that in the right-wing circles, we're also seeing some people who I would have hoped would know better, but obviously not, who've been telling people to get ready, watch out, ready yourself, there's big danger coming, that sort of thing. And I'm referring specifically, I'll name one name here, is Wynand du Toit, former prisoner of war in Angola years ago. Continuously on social media telling people that there's this huge thing coming, you're in great danger, watch out for this, watch out for that. And we know what happens when people are scared. Scared people do stupid things. They react irrationally. And that worries me sometimes even more than what's happening on the government side. I don't know whether you've picked up on that, Antoni and Max, but it's not something that should be happening right now.
I agree with you. If I can jump in quickly, Kobus, and I'll be very quick. I was holding my breath when I watched the live coverage of the Senekal court case. And it seems to me that this news of the Kolini two, who were found not guilty of all charges, might revive this white right-wing movement to move towards some kind of a state of readiness to take action if necessary. I was holding my breath, but it didn't happen. That ugly confrontation between a very naughty EFF, very deliberate taunting of the white Afrikaners, and then a very disorganized ensemble of white men, farmers, with apparent different leaders, didn't result in a bloodbath. Not one shot was fired. There was no ugly confrontation. There was taunting. There was a challenge. It was a bit of a schoolboy type situation. And that
but
gave
the interesting
me hope.
there is, Antoni, if I can interrupt you there, is that the interesting thing to me was that those particular people on the white side who confronted the EFF people or were confronted by EFF generally are people who aren't, they're not farmers. They came in from elsewhere. And we've seen more than once these past few weeks where actual farmers have pushed these people away and say, don't come and queer our pitch, don't come and cause trouble here. We're trying to fix things. And you know, so you don't need people going from the cities and trying to remember their youth of 100 years ago when they carried a weapon and tried to be soldiers.
Because there's a desperate attempt to maintain the middle ground. You know, if you talk to Toko Didiza and you talk to farmers, you will discover that there's an enormous reservoir of goodwill and an attempt to make sure that security of food supply is maintained in this country. And I am not of the opinion that white farmers are racists. I am of the opinion that there are politically inspired white Afrikaners who run around, who prepare for doomsday, and they rely on prophecies that comes from many years ago. And I don't think, if you ask me, that they are going to be the biggest problem that we face. The bigger problem lies with those who wants to take control of the ANC and continue with another form of state capture.
Yes, I agree. I see these wild guys on mostly social media. And I mean, I think we need to talk about social media because that's where these people live and that's where they thrive. That's how Senekal came about in the first place, because the message was sent on via Facebook, especially, that there was this young man who was tortured to death and then hanged up by his neck on a pole with a sign or something. And it was a message to white people, get off the land. Now, that would have been very disturbing because that would have been a very clear motive and a very clear political message coupled to a farm attack. But it wasn't true. It was simply not true. He, according to his own employer, happened to arrive where people were stealing livestock, surprised them, and they killed him, and that's it. So this kind of phenomenon lives on social media, and I think it'll help us to look at the United States and look at the militia there and look at the sort of hardcore of the Trump base. They do and say the same kind of things. And I spent quite a bit of time trying to find out what was happening in Senekal. And my conclusion was that most farmers, every single farmer that I spoke to, and I mean, that's where I come from. I know some of those people personally. And I have family members who farm in that area. And they all said, our problem is not the ANC, not black people. Our problem is stock theft and a slow reaction by the police. And don't you guys come in from anywhere else and come and make our lives difficult. So I wouldn't overreact to all these wild guys on social media. I think we should remember what happened in 1994 in Botswana. And I think any kind of wild, brandy-induced violent spree will end up the same way. But on the other hand, if you look at Brackenfell and you look at Senekal and you look at the tense times that we live in because of COVID and economic collapse, what could happen is one or two trigger events, and that could set up something that could escalate into something bigger. So we have to be on our guard. I think personally that the faith communities should play a much stronger role.
You referred to the Colini 2, and I think we can just shortly look at that because it actually, I get two distinct messages out of this whole thing of the two, Philip Schutte and Peter Doorewaard being found not guilty by the appeal court. On the one hand, the fact that there was some serious mistakes made in the first place with their trial is an indication, I think, that things can go wrong there. But at the same time, the fact that the appeal court now said, no, they're not guilty. And if I can say this, looking at the names of the judges, the three judges who made this finding, there's no Afrikaans-speaking person involved in this, and certainly not a white Afrikaans-speaking person involved.
Or not a white person at all.
So Sanko and these people who are now already saying, trying to tie this to a racist thing that these two guys were now found not guilty. It's a sad reflection on where we are on the one hand, but it's also a very strong proof to us again that at least on the higher levels, our legal system works.
Okay, but here's the problem, Kobus. I'm going to read you a tweet by Mr. Panyaza Lesufi, who is one of the most senior ANC politicians in Gauteng. He's the MEC for Education. Last night, he tweeted, I quote, "We don't mind to respect the law, but when the law is meaningless, it will be challenged." We can't surrender our hard-fought freedom to racists and AfriForum. NPA, please do the honorable thing and appeal this nonsense. So I found that very disturbing. And of course, then hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of people on Twitter came and cheered him on and said, yeah, we will stop them. And white people never go to jail. And were these judges caught? So the insults to judges, the undermining of the integrity of our judicial system has become far too often, happens too often. I mean, you had Tony Yangeni, Dudu Myeni, Carl Niehaus, Jacob Zuma, Andile Lungisa, all saying the same things, that are these judges bought? Why are they doing the white people's work for them? So you don't only have to have a functioning and independent judiciary, which we have, you also have to have public respect for that judiciary and the credibility for our judiciary, for the whole system to work.
And that starts with a government that actually stands up and insists on that and sets the example. So,
yeah, and I would really like to see Mr. Lesufi being called to order by either the judges or by Luthuli House.
We're running out of time, and there are so many things I'd love to talk to you two about today, but I'm going to try and get at least two things in here before we run out. And the one is Antoni, Cabo Delgado, Mozambique, Al-Shabaab, I think, and all sorts of people getting involved there, terror attacks. What is SADC doing about it?
Yeah, well, Cobus, to start with, SADC had a special summit in the last 2-3 days and released a communique, a statement yesterday to say that they are paying attention to this. So they recognize the scourge of terrorism, particularly in the northern part of Mozambique, and they are calling on SADC, the 16 member states of SADC, to urgently finalize an intervention plan. But I know if you speak to people behind the scenes that SADC is waiting for Mozambique to come up with an intervention plan, and Mozambique is waiting for SADC to come up with an intervention plan. And even if there is a military intervention, it requires a standby force or a rapid reaction force of some significance to be put together and to be deployed, and then intervene and restore law and order. But you and I know that when you send in the military or the defense force or drones, if you securize or militarize a terror threat or violent extremism, whether it's in Iraq or Afghanistan or Syria or Libya or closer to home, northern Mozambique, the problems don't go away. In fact, they get worse. A military solution to a violent extremist organization that sort of uses local grievances that relates to inequality, poverty, and neglect by the central authority cannot be defeated by guns. And you can't bomb a political belief system or an ideology that tells locals that the capital has forgotten about you and your future lies with us. We will look after you, and our form of government takes a particular religious and ideological form. And that, I think, is what's going on in the northern part of Mozambique. And the intervention cannot be of military nature only. It must be also dealing with the root causes of the problem. And this business of radicalizing young men and women who are prepared to take up the weapon and behead elders in a village or a community. It tells you a lot of stuff. It tells you that these areas have become ungovernable. And is there a lesson in the rest of the region? Is there a lesson to be learned for us? Certainly, as soon as central government or provincial government neglects to provide the social services and the basic necessities, people become isolated, and angry. And if you add this extra ingredient of a radical ideology, you might be able to whip up sentiment that then results in this form of very violent extremism. And there's no doubt in my mind that if this is left unchecked, it will spread throughout the region. We have lessons to learn from West Africa, particularly Nigeria, with Boko Haram, and Somalia, East Africa, Al-Shabaab, and in fact across the Sahel region. This scourge will visit Southern Africa if we don't act fast. And I'm afraid to say that SADC is not yet ready. And may I say, Kobus, people say, but South Africa is the giant in the region. We're the hegemon. We are the biggest economy. We have a defense force. That requires another conversation. Is our defense force able to deploy at short notice to deal with a deep-seated insurgency 1,000 kilometers from our borders?
Also, Max, the other question would be, could our government and our defense force and other forces deal with that sort of situation if it should arise here? Listening to you talking about lack of services and all sorts of things that people just outside, even in Joburg and on the outskirts of Joburg, this what they would like to call a world-class city, we have places where this type of thing is going on. So surely, I mean, we're not too far off from that sort of thing as well if we don't look out.
Yeah, I think at the bottom of most of what we're talking about is that we should now declare ourselves an incapable state, not a failed state, not even a failing state, but we have an incapable state on all levels, but especially on local level. And fortunately, I live in the Cape, so it's not so incapable around here. But you go to the Eastern Cape and Mpumalanga and Free State and Northwest, our state is failing people on a large scale, and that means people are going to get angry, exactly as Antoni now explained the people in Cabo Delgado. I do not think we have the religious factor here. Remember, Islam is very old in South Africa. It is as old as European settlement. So the first Muslims came here shortly after 1652, and it's completely integrated into our society. So we've never had a real problem with militant Islamic fundamentalism here. So I think that's not our problem. Our problem is neglected citizens in faraway corners, and they are neglected. I mean, just look at we still have mud schools. We still have schools with no toilets. We still have people who have no water in 2020.
I've got to close off, but we've got to go to America first. We can't have this discussion today without looking at Mr. Trump on the one hand, still saying that there's been huge fraud and during the elections and so on. But then Mr. Biden has nominated his cabinet, very middle of the road, which to me, but that's me, with my views, it looks quite encouraging. But at the same time, there's a lot of people to the far left in America, the far left side of the Democratic Party, and of course, all those people who voted for Mr. Trump, who are not going to be very happy with that. So he's not out of the woods yet. Mr. Biden, I mean. Marcus?
Yeah.
Antoni, sorry.
Antoni is the specialist.
Antoni?
Yeah, I refuse to use the name of the person who has lost the election. But Kobus, I must say that he collected 70 million or more votes. Biden collected 80 million or so votes, which means that America is not a united society; it's divided, and Trumpism might live on for a considerable time. And these electoral processes or cycles in America are relatively short. And there's a chance that some of the Trump types might come back, depending on how Biden does. So what Biden has done is he's brought the establishment back. And it's good and bad. Everybody yearns or desires a normalization of politics, in the sense that you don't want a rude, bullying, aggressive, angry, twisted and bitter man setting the agenda. Biden has none of this. In fact, with Kamala Harris, I think it's a powerful team, and it speaks to the rationality of democratic politics. But he's busy putting together a team that's, as you say, Kobus, middle of the road. He's ignoring the fringes of his political party. Any party has broad church, fringes and so on. So he will very soon run into policy difficulties at home, where he has to convince the Republicans in the Senate to agree with him. And starting with the way that the COVID crisis, which is taken off, it's even worse today than it was 6 months ago. That is his first and immediate challenge. And it's not necessarily so that he's got the Republicans on his side to deal with this pandemic crisis. It's a very deep crisis. And then we don't have time, I suppose, but what can we expect on the foreign policy front? Trump has set, I'm using his name now, he has set processes in motion of how the Americans deal with the Middle East or with China or Russia, and neglecting Africa, that Biden will find difficult to counter or reverse or normalize in the short term. You can join the Paris Climate Accord and you can go back and negotiate with Iran. But in 4 years, a lot of damage was done to the essence of multilateralism, the idealistic idea that we can work together to build a better future. It's been damaged. And Biden has to recover that before he can even push his own agenda of what it is that America should do on the world stage.
Well, there we've got to call a halt. I'd like to thank my two guests today. Max de Pre, always a pleasure having you on the program.
Thanks, Kobus.
And the same to you, Antonie van Nieuwkerk. Hope to see you both quite soon again. And we'll be back next Sunday, 5 o'clock. I hope you have a lovely week and take it easy. Bye-bye.